Good afternoon. My name is Fred Hocker. I'm the Director of the Research here at the Vasa Museum, and welcome to today's broadcast of 1628, our live broadcast to introduce you to little-known things at the Vasa Museum. So one of the paradoxes with the Vasa find is that the find is unique, but many of the finds are not. When Vasa was excavated, over 40,000 objects were recovered from the ship. And for most of those objects, they're just ordinary, everyday things that you would find in 17th century Sweden. And for most of them, you can find a better one at our neighbor's house at the Nordic Museum that hasn't been underwater for 333 years. What makes them unique is they were all found together. They were all in use at the same moment in time. It's the collection as a whole that's really unique. However, there are a few things on Vasa from Vasa you cannot see anywhere else because they haven't been found anywhere else. One of those is right behind me. This is the ship's upper foretop gallant sail. It's the smallest sail in the ship's rig, which had 10 sails. But because of the astounding conditions of preservation on the bottom of Stockholm Harbor, not only did the timber in the ship survive, but even the very fragile cloth of 6 of the ship's 10 sails survived. The ones that had not been set up in the rigging yet, but were still folded up in long canvas sausages, just as they'd been delivered from the sailmaker in the summer of 1628. Now that material, when it was found, was in terrible shape. When we talk about good preservation, it's relative. And so this is a picture from the excavation in 1961. This is what those sails looked like. A big wet pile of newspaper. And it took conservators 10 years of carefully unfolding that pile of wet newspaper to discover that it included 6 of the ship's sails, plus an extra bit to one of the sails, and even 2 sails from the ship's boat. And through that process of conservation, we were able to reconstruct how the ship is rigged, and we can learn a lot from that about how the ship was sailed. Some of the things that are interesting about this is some of the most international material on the ship. The cloth itself may have come all the way from France. The best sailcloth in Europe was made in northern France in this period. And the contract for rigging ships in the Swedish Navy specified that they should buy French canvas. But French canvas was expensive. And even if you got that instead of the next best choice, which was Dutch canvas, you probably bought it in Amsterdam. And in fact, we think that the bills of lading for shipping this cloth from Amsterdam to Stockholm have been located. This material is specially woven. It's not any kind of ordinary cloth. It has to be woven with what's called an unbalanced weave. And that is the warp fibers and the weft fibers are not at the same size or the same tension in order to get the sail to shape properly. But each one of those cloths has to be woven the same way. The rope that goes along the outer edges has to be specially made for the sails, and very likely was purchased at the same time and the same place as specially made sail roping. It's probably imported, not made here in Sweden. And we can even get very close to the people who were making these products. Sailcloth was woven by individual weavers in their homes. The raw material, the fiber or thread was delivered to them. They wove the cloth and then delivered it to the contractor. And what they had to do when they delivered a bolt of sailcloth, which was supposed to be 40 ells or 80 feet, about 25 meters long, they had to deliver it, and on the end of the bolt, once they'd rolled it up, it had to have their name and how much cloth was in it. This particular cloth, and a bolt of cloth was about this wide, supposedly 2 feet to 2.5 feet, or say 65 to 80 centimeters. And so then it was sewn together. And this piece of a sail called the mizzen bonnet is the tail end of a bolt. And we can tell because you can still see where the weaver wrote his name and how much cloth was in it. Probably in charcoal, which is why it survived. You can see there's D, R in the beginning of another letter, and then unfortunately, and it looks like there's an O over here. We've lost the rest of it. And then there's the remains of some number that he's written down here, which is probably, it looks like a 40, which means it's 40 L's, the standard length for a bolt of cloth. I think it's fascinating that we can look at an object so fragile, produced so long ago after 333 years underwater, and still see the charcoal signature of the man who made it. These finds are unique. There's nothing else like them that you can see in a museum anywhere else. And even though they're fragmentary, they provide a fascinating picture of the international scale of the process of building and equipping Vasa, as well as a testament to the preservative powers of the polluted waters of Stockholm Harbor. Join us tomorrow at 1628 for another edition, another introduction to what you might see at the Vasa Museum.